The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor, Thomas Goss, and it is my great pleasure to be bringing you the orchestration challenge that I didn't think was going to happen. There was so much going on this year, so many things that kind of didn't happen at the right time at the beginning of this year, and then I've been waiting on starting some major projects towards the end of the year. And finally, the time came when I would either have to give up on having any kind of orchestration challenge this year, or reorganize my time so that I could fit in some kind of orchestration challenge, just so long as it sort of went like clockwork. And even at that, I have 2 or 3 other things going on right now which are running alongside all of this. So that means that my comments are going to be a bit briefer than usual. I'm not going to go into such enormous detail, but I might try to cover everything that I would normally say, but just do it in a shorter way. All right? So please bear with me if you've been used to having, massively long lectures. I'm going to try to economize a little bit just so that I can fit everything in and make sure everybody gets enough feedback from me. All right? So you have been watching this video, you saw the evaluation criteria at the beginning. If you have any questions about my method or what I am using to make my decisions about what to say, that is where to jump to. All right, so let's start off at the beginning. And I really enjoyed this, Xiaofang. I was really happy to get another entry from you this year, and also to sort of see how you're, where you're going as an orchestrator. Now, just kind of looking at a few basic engraving things, you really can't have 2 bar rests in incomplete bars, right? So this is an incomplete 2/4 bar, and this is an incomplete 4/4 bar, right? The 4/4 actually starts right here on the downbeat of this bar. So you can still put the 4/4 here, but just make sure that these rests are all quarter rests, and then the same thing with these rests too, should be quarter rests, because you've got a quarter note's worth of time here. Now, as to the orchestration here, I was actually quite enchanted by a lot of features. I liked the idea of having your fourth and your double bass in octaves. I think that's very effective. I did something similar. Only I think, did I use I can't even remember what I did, even though I was polishing up the editing on that lecture, so let's not get into that. But I did something very close, if not the same. So, so you've got basically the outline more or less, but the real melody is being stated by flutes, English horn, and so on. Clarinet, first clarinet here. So you've got this massive triple unison, and one of the things is that it really is not balanced very well. I would say that the English horn and the clarinet are pretty well balanced, but the flute is just there for color, if at all, if it will contribute anything at all, because the English horn has a tendency to absorb the quality of tone of the flute, right? So like when it's playing, if you were to just do flute and English horn unison, then you would get whatever it is about the English horn that can emulate the sound of a flute, which it can do in ways that you would not imagine possibly. That would be underlined. But then adding the clarinet to it, you sort of remove anything about that has much of a subtle difference, right? So I think that the flute is almost completely unnecessary here. Now you could try doing balancing things, like saying, oh well, mezzo piano on my flute, or and then maybe piano or even pianissimo on the other parts. But what will happen in a live situation is that the players will try to balance, but in terms of tone weight and projection, the flutes will be they will be really behind things until they're right about here on this D, so or maybe the B flat. So I think that it's a noble idea, but there's still some problems there. I like the phrasing here, or the slurring. Da 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 da. It's nice. Okay, so moving on to Allegro ma non troppo. This is nice. It's a little. It's a little motoristic, it's sort of like the Peter theme from Peter and the Wolf, right? Has that sort of kind of chugging along kind of a feeling. But it's taken right out of the there are many string quartets and symphonies where the cellos do things like this. And I really approve of the idea of starting this off with pizzicato. That's something I did myself. The string writing in here is pretty good. It's a nice transcription of what happened before. I think that you don't really need to double the melody line here with both sets of violins. It might be better if you were to spread out the harmonic rolls with the different groups, rather than just having so much weight. But I really love how you go to the octaves here. Now, one thing about this is there a natural transition to octaves right here? So, like, do they naturally grow out of what happens before? And I would say you put so much weight on this octave melody that it doesn't really arise out of the preceding texture, right? It's just something that adds to it. Like, it's like the next thing. It's not all one phrase. It's you've got this first phrase, ya da 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 da. Then you have these pretty firm octaves here, with octave clarinets, and once again you have a duet second flutes, and then you've got ba da 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 da. See, so these really are two sort of separate things. They're not quite going from one to the other. Now, do you expand without clogging up? Yes, I would say. So that was my concern with the left hand. So yeah, so there's a natural flow at the beginning, this sort of motoristic flow. And it doesn't necessarily quite go into this, except for the fact that you are getting the offbeats on a staccato with your violas. Maybe adding like some slurs to this to sort of make it mezzo staccato. They could get the kind of a sound rather than dun dun dun. Just kind of more of a slightly breathless lift might be kind of nice in there. There's nothing that the string players cannot do here in terms of covering 8 notes with one bow. But I mean, do you really want them to, like assume that this is like all up bow, right? See, this is, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So, do you really want that on under one bow? I mean, you could do up bow all the way to here, and then you get the increase of energy with a crescendo, and then down bow with a decrease of energy, right? So essentially, you have just dropped the right hand piano slur onto the string part, right? So seriously, like here you had this lovely, you really worked out how the slurring would work here, the articulation of this, so to bring some meaning into it. That was fantastic. But then here it all falls apart, right? Because you're just sort of thinking, you just have this really long line with the strings. So, I think maybe the best way to go about this would just be to do like, maybe half bars, like so down, up, down, right? Might be one way of doing it. Or you could do just up, so they can push into it, because the up bow is increases in strength, right? Because it's going towards the bottom of the bow. And then here, decreasing in strength on the down bow. Might be, and you don't need to have the other instrument slur. Now, as to the use of flute in here, once again, I mean, the flute is just really like, until you get up into these notes in here above C and D and so on, it's really not adding a whole lot to this texture. So, I mean, once again, it's out of balance. You're using it for color, right? Well, couldn't it just be clarinets and just get rid of the flutes? And then here, when this flute comes in, it's just like the dawn breaking, because it's this new color, right? Dum. It's interesting that you've chosen to have this these octaves here, which is completely nothing wrong with having flute and clarinet octaves. It has just this wonderful springtime kind of sound. Whereas like these clarinet octaves back here, if they were completely exposed without any doubling from the strings, they would have a very spicy kind of a sound, very piquant type of a sound. Then moving back to this, how can I argue with using bassoon here? That's what I did. And it works pretty nicely with the cellos doubling the bassoons. And this is very cool too. This little pizzicato in here. So once again, here's the question of, does this part need harmonic support behind it, right? And you have chosen to put some harmonic support on the end, just kind of more for emphasis, right? And then this works really nicely too. Oboe, with the bassoon. And this is interesting. This time you have bassoon but no cello. I guess you're setting things up for this big push. Okay, so you want to go up, down, up, down. I mean, it's just really, really strange here, the way that this is bowed. Like everything is under one bow. Why couldn't you have just gone down bow, up bow, and then you could just go down, up, down, right? Rather than having everything under one bow. And here, like for the flutes and oboes, you could just have one long bow here. And you might want to have some sort of articulation to bring this out, just... now here you're going back to piano, right? So you're not maintaining the strength. Right? You're just dropping things down. I must say you're really using a lot of mezzo dynamics that Beethoven does not have in his score. You've got mezzo piano here and mezzo forte, diminuendo to mezzo piano. Did you watch my 12 common scoring errors video, Xiaofang? I mean, I really want to know that you have watched that, where I talk about avoiding too much mezzo this and mezzo that. All right, because I just really think it's very unnecessary. The dynamic markings in general are a little inconsistent, right? I mean, kind of going back here, there is no new dynamic marking on this. This is a new idea in the music. Is this still mezzo piano? And then here you have these, this new texture in here in the strings, and you mark piano here, but you don't mark it here. And then how loud is the cello supposed to be? How loud is the bassoon supposed to be? So I just think a little bit more care could have been exerted. And you can get a beautiful sound piano. You don't need to be mezzo piano, right? Okay. Yeah, and this is all really nice. I like the textural scoring right in here. That's nice. Okay, here's the problem though. Okay, you have this triple octave here, which is, it's fine. But I do a flutes here at the top. It's just a really high note for the oboes to be starting on mezzo piano. It's not that this is impossible, it's just that it's really not that pleasant. See, if you were to double this with strings, right, then the strings would absorb any kind of real thinness and unconvincingness about this. And also you have, on those very, very high notes, you've got doubled oboes, right? You've got unison oboes, and you only need one up here, right? And maybe you only need the oboes to come in right here, or maybe you don't even need them at all, right? Or maybe they could be playing an octave lower, right? And then, they'll have that low B to worry about, so that's not the most pleasant thing in the world. But it's just really high, to start in on a mezzo piano, unison with the flutes. There'll be a sort of a wind band quality there rather than an orchestral quality. So this is not the most ideal situation. This is neat right in here though. I like the unison rather than octaves here in the lower strings. It's nice. Yeah, and then this is all fun. The winds answered by the strings. Now here, you don't need to transcribe every single harmonic note in a chord, right? You can leave some out. Just leave out the things that double, right? Check out the lesson that I released just a day ago on my interpretation of Beethoven. When I was revoicing a lot of the chords in the winds, I would just leave out things that pitches that were the same across the chords. I would say that it's, there's no need to have the violas do this much all at once, right? Yeah, you could leave some pitches out easily. In fact, there's more. I would actually rather give more pitches to the violins than I would want to give to the violas. Although violas, they fill in beautifully in the middle, but just in a situation like this, your first violins could be getting these pitches and these pitches here that the seconds are playing, right? And you could be completely revoicing the chord right in here. So it doesn't have to be, quite so heavy. I mean, I'm actually looking at so there are 8 pitches to be scored, right? So and you try to catch all of them, but you don't really need to, right? You could especially at lower down, right? You don't really need this E in here. You don't really need this C, right? So anyway, that other than that, I really enjoyed this score. It's funny, like I picked everything to bits and said, other than that, but it's still, you are definitely progressing as an orchestrator, and I'm just so happy to be getting these entries from you, and I'm really hoping that you will join us next year, because I have something planned. I actually have things planned at least 2 years in advance, if not more. And there's one composer, oh boy, I would jump through hoops, definitely, to try to get us permission to score this one piece of theirs. But it's still not in the public domain. And, it's a situation where that particular composer's estate can be very, very picky about what they say yes to. But I'll say no more, except to say thank you so much for your entry. Now let's take a look at the next one. All right, Micah, that's a really pleasant sounding score. There are some things in there that are obviously transcription errors, like da 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 da. So it seems like right here you must have miscopied the information, and if you had intended to have a variation, right, rather than a transcription, and just sort of change the flow, change the notes around, then you ended up with the situation here where you are going to a target note of G, and here you're going to a target note of A, right? So you have a conflict right there immediately. So anyway, I'm not going to focus on that so much, more on the scoring, but just, try to use my templates, right? I mean, that's what they're there for. They've got all of the information right there on the template, which you can use and, and sort of judge for yourself how much you want to. Seems like there are one or two other places that look like there might be errors where you might have just copied off the screen, but maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe like you had one area selected and then it sort of dropped accidentally, and then it got replicated throughout anything else that was copy pasted. All right, well, look, that's really not the issue so much. One thing is, you sort of have to play by a certain amount of rules here, and one of those just kind of goes down to telling the conductor and the orchestra manager who will be reading the score how many of each there are. Now I've got a special video on instrument names that you can check out. It's part of my Orchestra Librarian series. It's actually the first video, right? So you got to tell us how many flutes, right? You're just saying flute. How many flutes are there? Here you're saying with 3, right? So, but that's not enough, right? It's really, this obviously we don't have room for an instrumentation page in these challenges, though some people supply them. But yeah, 3 flutes, 3 oboes, 3 clarinets, right? And here you have 3 bassoons. So yeah, you can't just tell me singular, right? And then horn and F, 1, 3. There really isn't anything about this scoring that justifies having 1 and 3 on the same staff. I would not have 1 and 3 on the same staff unless there was a very, very long stretch of first and third playing together on the same notes, and they were fairly high, and there wasn't a lot of vertical space, right? In a situation like this, absolutely learn how to score 1 and 2 on the same staff with interlocking harmony, right? Now, like for instance here, you have the stacked harmonies in the correct positions, right? The third is the middle high voice, and the second is the middle low voice. But here, you have it all switched around with your third, right? It's supposed to be horn 3, right? And here it is your middle low voice, and the second the middle high voice. So you're not really sticking to your own kinds of things. And then here, right here, you have this melody shared by first and second rather than first and third, right? So if this was supposed to be 1 and 3, wouldn't this be just, a single line, a duet, right? And then this D, this row of Ds here played in harmony with this B, C, and B, right? So it's a little unsystematic. And then here you've got, like, you say tuba, but then you show me octaves in the tuba, right? The tuba, like, if you have 2 tubas, that would really be extraordinary. It would be better for you to have a bass trombone part, right? Or here you could say bass trombone and tuba, right? As right here. And then 2 trombones, I guess 3 trumpets, and so on. All right. So now let's sort of start off with just the scoring and kind of how reasonable is it. You've got this massive, 9 instrument unison of this, playing this melody together. Clarinet, oboe, flute, and it's wildly out of balance here, right? Because flute this is the softest register of the flute, right? Just this entire area right in here till you get to around C, E, D. This area, the flute sort of comes out a little bit. but it's still rather limited by the by the situation of having those other instruments so close to it. Sorry, my cat meowed. I have no idea why. He just suddenly meowed. All right. So, but he's sitting in his box. I guess he was sort of adding an editorial comment. Okay. All right. So I guess your idea here was that you would go to sort of harmony here, and then the harmony would sort of gracefully lift and kind of be doubled by strings and so on. Okay. So the problem is that flute is really not a mid-range instrument. Right? This is incredibly gentle. On the other hand, just flip it around, and this is where the oboe's very penetrating qualities are just like right on that lowest register. The only person who is cool and even all the way through dynamically is the clarinets. Like, you could have had this all as a clarinet chorale, and it would have come out a lot better. But like the intensity of like these like triple winds in every single one is going to have a real wind band kind of a sound, right? Which is not necessarily bad, except for the fact that like it will completely dominate and obliterate the strings the way that you've scored them here. Actually, the bassoons, tuba, and lower strings here at pianissimo working together, it actually has a better chance of coming through. And then violins at pianissimo and trombones, the trombones are still going to be stronger than these middle strings in here. So it just needs a lot of balancing, a lot of work. Might need to reconceive this a bit. All right, and then here you've got just what feels like a massive unison. Even though you've got like your trumpets at pianissimo, you've got this, this octave here. I mean, are the trumpets even necessary in any way, shape, or form here? Maybe it would have been better just to have two, have octave horns here, right? Just like have 1 and 2 on the same staff, played as an octave, and then have the rest of the horns come in and just leave out the trumpets, maybe. Because, once again, you have a situation where you have one group of instruments much, much more powerful than the other, right? So here you've got, even though they're being told to play softly, you still have this pattern right in here. Now speaking of patterns, do you feel it's wise to have the double basses go duh? I mean, they've got very short bows, right? And they have a very, very deep sound. This feels a little inopportune. Now, when you get to here, that's not so bad. But wouldn't it be better possibly to have the contrabasses maybe pizzicato, or just single notes, just kind of like a single note of support on this, and then maybe like adding a little bit of texture from below, right? Because the cellos and the bassoons are doing perfectly fine by themselves. I would say that like right here, you're sort of going opposite to yourself, right? So here you have this really long slur, which is possible, but it would be better for the cellos to be divided into half bars, especially ma non troppo, right? So just maybe da, so down, up, down, up. So I mean, do you want it slurred and then not slurred? It just seems kind of strange, because then right here you got this staccato, yeta da 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 da, right? And maybe you shouldn't give away the feeling of being interrupted, and especially when you've got these nice smooth choral kind of scoring right in here. Now once again, like you've got this this conception here of kind of really just keeping all your winds together, right? And it just, once again, the lower flute parts right in here, they will be obliterated. They're gone. They're almost completely useless, right? Anything below D here in this kind of combination will just be smothered. Whereas, like, going all the way down here to this B in your oboe, this will stand out. And here you're asking for niente from oboes, right? Which is almost impossible. Like they have tongueless attack, but that's not the same thing as niente. Okay, so it looks to me, Micah, as if you didn't watch or perhaps didn't watch close enough, my 12 common scoring errors, right? No, so what do I say about Niente? Don't use Niente unless it is an effect of its own that the audience can hear and pay attention to, right? Because the way that you got it here, you're just fading in. So if you're doing that, you might as well just start off triple P, right? Which each instrument player has got their own conception of what triple P is. But Niente really means nothing, right? That is sort of set in stone, and a lot of these players cannot actually do that, right? The oboes really cannot do that. The clarinets and flutes can do it, but I mean it's sort of wasted. It's just, you want what you're wanting here. I understand what you want. You want the winds to sort of effortlessly fade in from the brass. You want this sort of change of texture, right? But you don't need Niente. You absolutely don't need Niente. Like half the time that I see Niente scored, it's completely unnecessary. Just mark triple P. And these players will fade in beautifully behind that brass without, all of, like, you want to avoid raised hands in rehearsal, right? This would get raised hands in rehearsal. Or you would just get, you'll just get triple P anyway. So if that's what you're going to get, then just score triple P, okay? All right. So as to the chorale scoring, once again, the intention of it is really, really nice. I think that if you were to... if you're sort of to reconceive this a little bit so that it was mostly clarinets with flutes and oboes sort of helping out in middle and higher pitches, and then maybe it would be a bit more balanced. If you have three bassoons, then you could have the first bassoon doubling some of these inner voices, or some of the lower voices very, very softly, right? So that takes care of any kind of third oboe stuff. Get rid of any third oboe scoring in here. Give it to the first bassoon, right? And then you have first bassoon doing this lower line, and then a second bassoon playing the pattern, and third bassoon playing this low bit. And you also have to tell us, who is this guy? Is this all three of them? Is this a single bassoonist? Two of them? Who is it? And then, same thing here. You're going to octaves. Is this two players? One? Do you intend, if you intend this same thing to happen, you have to tell us here because, there's no way, you have interrupted this whole idea of, of the interval here with the two on top and the one on the bottom. All right. Yeah, and then here you have two-part writing. Who is playing what? And then here, is this all three players at once? Yeah. Yeah. So and once again, this was misspelled or miscopied or you had a new interpretation, but it doesn't really line up harmonically, right? Okay, and then once again we have register problems, right? So flute is fine, and then as they descend, they just disappear and they're gone. And then here you want dun dun dun. The flute is really kind of wasted here. So oboe and clarinet, it works out great, right? And you're not going too low here. Your lowest note here is C sharp. It's a little weird, but these Ds are certainly no problem, right? And then this is really lovely right in here with the bassoons. Maybe you just have too much going on, Micah. Why not just have one group playing and the other group playing and so on? What if this were just clarinets here, and then you had a combination of clarinets and oboes here, and then here you had a combination of clarinets and bassoons, or oboes and bassoons. Well, why does it have to be everybody all the time? And then here you've got you've got your strings coming down here. So do you really want it you're being emphatic, right? There should be a crescendo here, right? Da 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 da. But here you put in a crescendo, dun dun dun. Do you really want that to be da? Or do you want it to be down, up, down with the bow, right? Just something emphatic. Here you've marked a dynamic of piano, and then you've thrown in the harp, and you haven't given us any dynamic. In order for the harp to balance here, it would have to be marked at least mezzo forte. All right, and it's remember I had did you watch the common scoring errors thing, right? What did I say about dumping the piano part onto the harp part? All right, I mean, what is audible about this harp part? What does it add to the music? You have to ask yourself that. I'm not really seeing it adding anything. If you were to rescore this an octave higher and have nice big rolls, like brum, brium, brium, but like, brium, brium, brium. Pardon my out of tune high singing. But do you see what I mean? That would add something. But as it is here, it'll add a tiny bit of punctuation, and the beautiful tone of the harp, which is what we want it for in the first place, right, is just completely smothered, right? Just as smothered as this mid-range flute scoring is up against all of this, the strings alone will absorb anything that the flutes are doing here. And then on top of that, you've got double reeds and single reeds playing on top of it, right? So nobody's going to hear the flute here, really, unless the conductor takes time to balance everything out. And, it's just kind of a waste of time. You might as well not have scored it that way. All right, now, here you have this lovely stuff going on here, but like brass and percussion against harp, right? Why is the harp there at all, right? What can it contribute? What instruments blast away any kind of contribution to the harp? It is percussion and brass. Right? And then here, once again, this would sound great on harp, an octave higher, with nice big gushing rolls, right? And then, this flute part right in here is completely unnecessary. And yeah, but other than that, like the reed scoring is pretty good. Yeah, and then here you have this big, this nice big chord. So anyway, so don't lose heart just because I'm criticizing everything and ripping it to bits and so on and saying do this, do that. The fact is that, like what I said at the beginning, still holds. Is that it's a very pleasant sounding score. It's a very nice sounding score. So like a lot of the preconceptions that you had about how this should sound and everything are good ones. You just need to cut way back on the texture. You have elements in here that would sound fantastic if they weren't so heavily scored, right? So, so that would be my advice. When you run into this, especially this kind of classical period scoring, this classical era scoring, how much does Beethoven, what kind of massive amount of sound does Beethoven get by with just like 5 instruments playing, or like he has the string section playing and he has a few, he has like a couple of horns and a couple of winds and he gets this massive sound, right? So go back, study some more Beethoven, and just see, just for your own sake, if you can cut back some of the texture and feel good about it, all right? Because you don't need these trumpets here. You don't need the flutes most of the time, all right? What if you saved the flutes for right? What if you saved the flutes for like that passage and just didn't even use them at all, right? But don't bother with Niente. Like Niente should be a textural thing. It should be like dead silence, right? And then out of the dead silence comes this sound that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Or fades away into nothing. And the audience is really focused on the fact that it is fading away, right? That is where you use Niente, and that is where it is such a powerful effect. Here, it's a waste. It's just a complete waste. Triple P is what you want here, okay? Piano pianissimo is what you want in here. 3 Ps. And you get exactly the same effect as if you were to ask for Niente, especially from your double reeds. Alrighty, so other than that, great work. Thank you so much for entering this challenge this year, and I really hope that you will not get discouraged and that you'll think about some of the things that I said. You'll use that craft to improve your scoring and get better and better as an orchestrator. Because the aims here, the overall effect of the playback is beautiful, right? So you just have to cut away everything that doesn't need to be there in order for it to work, right? And just, fix things like this, right? That are faults of transcription, perhaps. All right? Great work, man. All right, on to the next evaluation. All right, Victor. That is really, really fun. Now, let's play by the rules, okay? Because I don't want to get too far off track from my own evaluation criteria, right? So, does the intro set the mood effectively? Yes, I feel that it does. It's like really nice the way you're starting with strings. You've reharmonized this chorale right in here. One thing I would say that the sound, like the string sound here in your mock-up, is really unrealistic. It's just way too heavy. It doesn't have the kind of elegance, right, that you would sort of expect from this material. But it's still pretty, it's still nice. Just the lower strings feel really heavy, and the middle strings feel really kind of musky. So yeah, it doesn't have that nice, beautiful, gentle, velvety kind of a sound. Yeah, yeah. Put the tenuto on both note heads, not just on the first one. See, this doesn't really mean anything, right? So if you were intending, like you're looking at this and you're saying, oh look, this pitch changes, right? And I want this kind of smooth sound on the second violins, and I want it to sort of be emphasized, kind of have this sort of tenuto, this portato kind of a feel, right? So it almost feels like it's slurring the same note. The way that you get that is to put the tenuto mark on both note heads, okay? The same articulation, and then you'll get that sound. Yeah, da 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 da. It's nice. Yeah, so you should definitely have fermatas here for these rests. So just so that the other players know, right? And it's also it's a requirement, right, in engraving. Could there have been a little surge of dynamic here, a little bit, just or maybe a little bit of a push up to this D, maybe even a little fermata on this second beat, da da da. You know what I mean? Now here, this is absolutely completely unnecessary, right? Any string player worth their salt, will be thinking down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? they know. You don't have to tell them. There's absolutely, it's like you're putting training wheels on a Maserati, right? You don't need it. Now here you want da 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 da. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting way of putting it. But why are the clarinets like you completely lose the effect with the clarinets not having the same kind of articulation here. So yeah. So them carrying through is, kind of spoils the sense of lift here, right? Yeah, and then here you've got this kind of portato feeling. I would say you could give everybody portato, right? And because it just makes more sense that way. Yeah, and then here you have sort of alternating notes, da 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 da. Yes, so you really reinterpreted the accompaniment, and and you have this. So does this distract, right? Does the melody start with elegance? I would say so. This is a bit of a little flurry, and I got no problem with it myself. Yeah. Is there a natural flow here? I would say so. I don't think you need to go da 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 ta ta ta. Is that really what you want? Maybe not. Maybe just like one slur with a first bassoonist. Da da. You know what I mean? It just so much flows so much better. Now, and here you have this lovely, just sort of all the instruments playing together. Da. That's nice. Yeah, I mean it's a bit of a Brahmsian kind of a sound, the way that you've scored it in here. It just has that real, kind of collective sense, sort of homogeneous kind of a sense. Have you set it up? This is where we get into the transition to octaves, right? That is the question of whether or not it by doing this little flurry in here and so on, that the transition to octaves is not quite so natural, right? Does it expand without clogging up? I would say that it gets denser here. Yeah. So I don't know if that's really cloggy, but it is Brahmsian rather than like, post Mozart. This is nice. Da 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 da. And then here you have ta 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 ta. Wow, that is really low for your second bassoon player. That's just, in terms of like the clarity. But it's I'm not saying that it's too low. I'm just saying that, that is just way down in the basement. And then here, da 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 da, bum 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 bum. Yeah. Right, and then flutes, bum, it just doubling from an octave above. I mean, yeah. I like the little touch of harmonic support here from the strings. You could have had it here as well. Do you know what I mean? Just maybe in another instrument or just more strings again. I mean, I can see, like I have in if you have watched my lecture, you'll notice that I do my harmonic support twice, and I also do pianissimo. And the question is whether or not it follows, right? Like, you finish this statement in strings, and then suddenly you drop down, and the strings provide support for a completely new kind of linear texture, right? So does it, would it be better to have that as clarinets if you're going to add that, or then question is like, do the clarinets following the clarinets, right? Does that also provide a contrast? Maybe not. Okay. All right, and then here you've got the flutes doubling at an octave above the contrary motion of the first violins and violas. Yeah, and then this turns in. You quickly turn this into thirds. All right, so you were probably listening to your own mock-up there and saying, "Oh man, there was just something wrong." So, well, what was wrong was you had B naturals and B flats at the same time. So, like, if you really had wanted this to be B natural, right, and then change to B flat later, then you need to make this also B natural, right, and this B natural, right, and yeah, and this the equivalent of B natural, right, which would be C sharp. Yeah, so that and this would yeah. This would also have to be an F sharp. So anyway, yeah, that's why you have that collision right in here. I mean, unless you like the collision. If that was intentional, then then you have a very naughty sense of humor. You have to go back to the class in a early 19th century composition class. So anyway, but other than that little thing, and then here, like, I mean, I just kind of wonder why the B natural is in there at all. Maybe just it shouldn't be in there, right? Because like if I wanted to have a B natural in the middle of the bar, I would start it way back here. I would, but then it just kind of doesn't quite sound right. Okay. So I mean, do you really want da 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 da? Yeah. What if you just kept it strong and then dropped down, right? So you get the contrast rather than like, then you could even just keep the contrast of dynamics up, just like keep it at poco forte, right? Soft, poco forte, soft, right? Yeah, and do you really want down, up, down, and da? In first flute and first oboe, right? It's sort of working. The phrasing is working, one against the other, and you don't get a smooth sound, right? And do you really just want the flutes to have all the fun up there? What if the first violins had some sort of higher, they were involved in this. Yeah, the stacking of the winds on top of the strings, I mean, it's all right, but you just really get you get like these layers of color, almost like a layer cake. Yeah. So I have to say, I'm liking your natural horn scoring. I'm assuming that this is intended to be natural horn. Yeah. So just to make sure, I was just making sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, these are all pitches that are, there's a bit of a half stopped F there, and and then this A will be, will be more on the stopped side and have a sort of kind of a sound to it. But it just, it'll all blend together with the bassoons and so on. And then, then this is all, that all works pretty well too. You got sort of like that half stop B. It's all good. I mean, it's like I don't mind a few little stopped pitches in my natural horn writing, and like if you look at Berlioz, he doesn't give a damn. He writes all kinds of A's and F's, and you have that stuff performed on natural horns, and it sounds fantastic because those players know how to like shape the sound. If you listen to Annika Scott's performance of the Beethoven, what I really love about her playing is that she not only lets the stopped sounds be stopped sounds, right, but she also like shapes them. So not to try to avoid the kind of crankiness of the sound, but just to to kind of get this beautiful even flow on some of the phrases and so on. And sometimes she'll let a high F be kind of very buzzy sounding, and sometimes she'll just like make it flow. If she goes E F G, she'll just make the F in the middle flow. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So I mean, it's actually there's a lot of this that works. So don't get me wrong. Yeah. Yeah, I love the courtliness of some of this wind scoring in here, and this is nice. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So just watch for some of those things that I mentioned, and yeah, just some nice, adventurous, playful stuff going on here that I really enjoyed a lot. On to the next evaluation. Well, that is some incredibly rich scoring, Michael. Uh, just you just really have gone all out to find as much color and as much texture as you can get out of the score. Now, having said that, maybe it gets a little over harmonized in places, right? So these these intervals that you've got in here, this harmony in the background, it seems a bit intrusive at times, doesn't it? It just sort of feels a bit like it's a lot of it is not really agreeing with the chords, right? And also by not really having much of a dynamic contrast, the difference between a soft, like an extra soft pianissimo background and a soft foreground is not, it's not all that distant. Like it's the same thing with these notes right in here that you've got in front of the yada da 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 dum da 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 dum. Like shouldn't the change actually be on the chord, on the harmonic change, right, rather than a beat later? And then the other thing too is that once again, like if this is soft and this is extra soft, it's 1 degree of force between the two, right? Anyway, for it's I almost feel that dynamics are more about color than they are really about force, though certainly force is the way that we measure them. But let's just kind of go back to the beginning and judge a little bit of using my evaluation criteria. You're starting off. Is this an elegant? Does this intro set the mood effectively? I would say setting the mood for what you plan ahead here. This very intensively thick music. Then yeah, I mean, you're throwing in this octave here on the bassoon is kind of lovely. This is going to be more of a solo against this, this really nice flowing line here. So it might distract a little bit from the continuity that, there's just the wonderful curve here of the strings. With a very slow adagio cantabile, you might want to divide up the measures a bit more, like down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, cut this slur in half. This one is good. And then cut this one in half too. You don't really need a slur from the first note, but so down here, up there, right? Yeah, I mean, I just started to feel a little thick in here. It's kind of strange the way that some of your pitches are a full quarter note length, and then other ones just sort of stop, right? And this harmony in the middle just stops, and I feel that it subtracts something when you don't have the continuity continuing, right? And and these horns right here, the sort of sounding the F and then the roll on the timpani, that's pretty cool, except for like, once again, like the distance between these two dynamics is really not very far, right? So if you allowed the music to crescendo, da, 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 maybe a little diminuendo here at the end, then it would make this a lot smoother. Like, as it is now, it just almost feels like it's interrupting, right? If this is the only note that you've got for contrabassoon in the entire arrangement, then you can just get rid of it because you're already playing that note on this low second horn. So you might think, well, doesn't the horn need a little bit of support on that low F? Like, isn't it wise to sort of double it on something? Yeah, I mean, sure it does, but you already got the cello down here, right? So you don't really need this contrabassoon note at all, right? It's just a waste of instrument. Or, you just have an extra player that is sitting there just doing one note. All right, and then, from here on, you're trying to sort of abide by some rules here, or just kind of use notes that are within the scope of the natural horn. I feel it's pretty good. That all works pretty well, I would say. Now, here we're starting to get into, like, there's some re-harmonization in a lot of this. And you just have to judge for yourself how much of that you want to do. Like the more you reharmonize this kind of material, the less it sounds like Beethoven. The more it sounds like an interpretation or like it just depends. Like, what, like the purpose is to see the, for me, is to see the orchestrator. So I'm happy to see, all kinds of strange variations and reharmonizations and everything else. So it doesn't bother me at all. But, if your intention here was to sound as like Beethoven as you could imagine yourself sounding, then I think that you would need to cut back on a lot of the added harmony, right? And just really try to use most of the pitches that Beethoven did, maybe in different voicing and so on. But maybe just certain curves to the way that the harmony is flowing are a little strange. So here we have like a stacked effect similar to the previous piece, where you've got you've got your winds, or your flute anyway, sitting on top, and then you've got the strings below and so on, and then you've got the thickening up of the strings with the winds. And this is really nice, like kind of these this sort of F and C just kind of singing through that, or adding a pedal tone throughout. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, I mean, not a big problem, but yeah. But, I mean, are you sure that you want pizzicato there? Pluck, 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 pluck. I mean, it sort of works, but yeah. Then here we got yada-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Yeah, and I mean, for me, this all worked fine. It just these these little pitches in the middle, they didn't really line up with the change of harmony on the downbeat, and also they're just so close dynamically, right? So if this were like mezzo forte or something, and you had that little pianissimo note in the background, right, that might work a little bit better. And then I mean, crescendo. I mean, we're in the 20th century now, 21st century now, so we can add hairpins and just really guide the player, right? And then just back to, are you going crescendo, then a little diminuendo back to piano? Would it be better to just maintain the strength here? Da 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 da, mezzo forte, bum bum. And really, do you want da and not down, up, down, and then here you go oomph, oomph, right? So like this is a marcato articulation, right? So it's like or martellata, right? So the player's going to be hammering this. They're going to be going wham, wham, right? And I just feel like the dynamics are not really well conceived right in here, right? If you're going to give this dynamic to some players, these triple stops, do you really want a piano dynamic on them? Do you want a contrast between these two, piano, mezzo forte at least, with this articulation, if not forte or fortissimo? And it would certainly help the contrast, so if you really did want some cushioning behind it. This I've looked at a lot of scores in preparation for this. This is the first time I've really kind of noted, of course, like I have to say at this point in the I'm doing a lot of evaluations in advance rather than waiting for next month, because I just do not have time this challenge. I used to in previous years I have done my evaluations following at the end of the like the deadline. Then I'll start evaluating things, but I have to do it way in advance this time because I'm doing a bunch of stuff all at once. So anyway, so I really have not. There's been about 30 entries, but I have not seen anybody do this yet. Adding a static harmony behind this, the motion here, right? So if you're going change of chord, shouldn't this harmony change, right, in the background? And the same thing, da da dum, and then shouldn't this also change, dun dun? So yeah, so just need to rethink it. If you're going to add so much static harmony behind this motion, then I think you need to just make sure that it all matches. I actually think the horns at the beginning are like the best part, right? It doesn't really stick out like a sore thumb till you get to here. So, and also, you might want to match some of the positioning of the horns that came previously, right? With your bassoons and clarinets. Just to get it to kind of, so that the harmony doesn't change so drastically. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on it. It's like it's not that there's a ton that's wrong with the orchestration necessarily. It's just that the harmony has just gotten very, very thick. It's gotten very, there's a lot of sidetracks away from Beethoven on it, which is neither. It's not a judgment on whether that's good or bad. It's just more like an observation, right? So yeah, so just maybe if you were intending to sound more like Beethoven, study Beethoven a little bit more. Watch out for the stacking of textures. Just make sure that that's exactly what you want, and so on. Beethoven does that from time to time too, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think this is interesting, the way you have your violin walk down, hold on to this note, and then join up with the flutes. That's a kind of a cool idea. But I would avoid doing things like this, making the middle line extra strong. You got your first oboe and your second flute on the same middle line here, so that's just not enough support of the. Yeah. So it's just very strange the way that you've got all this weight here on the dun dun dun, and here you got this dun dun dun. I just feel if you really were going to do that, you just would need a little bit more support on the top note on your harmonized melody with something, right? So, anyways, think about all those things. And it is fantastic to get another entry from you, Michael. There's like this crowd of about like 4 or 5 dozen website subscribers who I could almost like I can count on you guys just to send me a score, and it always just makes me think about things and just brings out the best in me as an orchestration coach, and just little things, little observations, noticing things that I just would never imagine to do, that like right or wrong, they could be things like, if it's something that doesn't work, it's something that actually might work really great with a different piece of music. And if it does work, it's something that might apply to other situations. And I'm not sure if I could say, I got this great idea from seeing somebody doing something in their score, because I'm not really keeping track of idea number 1342. I will reuse that in some other thing. I don't really think that way. It's just part of language, right? We're just sharing this language together. So anyway, so thank you for that, Michael, and let's keep rolling along. I can't wait to take a look at the next score. Excellent work, Garrett. Uh, a really lovely ear. You really brought a lot of aesthetics to this, and there's a few places where I think for the effect that you're trying to get, you may be trying a little too hard. Okay, but let's go over some of these areas and so on, and in first place, does the intro set the mood effectively? Absolutely does. Of course, you change the harmony on Beethoven, right? You don't let him just have that ending chord over da 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 dum. You sort of change it around, and if you were trying to sound closer to Beethoven, it's better to have the sense of suspension, right, than it is to correct the suspension with with a harmony transitioning to like this. But it's totally fine. Like it's just your own choices and so on. That in your own personality that you bring to it, and that's perfectly fine. Could you have possibly had a crescendo towards the downbeat of this bar rather than having these two little flexes? Da 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 da. Do you see what I'm saying? Rather than da 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 da. I just sort of kind of feels pulsing in here. I think that you want a surge, right? You could even have had a peak here and then diminuendo from there, right? So there are several different ways to do it. And then here, like, what do we mean by crescendo and then piano again? Right? Would it be possible to build an entire arc through here? Like piano crescendoing up to possible mezzo forte or mezzo piano? Mezzo forte, perhaps. by the time we get to here. So these instruments could come in mezzo piano halfway through this bar, right? So piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, mezzo piano, crescendo to the same place, right? And you can leave the horns out of it. You can just leave them at piano, and then they'll balance really nicely. And the same thing with the low strings and bassoons. They don't actually really even need to crescendo at all. It's just mainly the melody and the chorale beneath it, right? That need to move together dynamically. And this is really lovely, just like the way the oboe accompanies or doubles the first violins and then gets the little ornament all to itself. That's just some nice scoring, just nice, sensible, And then of course, like this does not really abide by the, you're not trying to avoid any stopped pitches, right? So this would really, I would say, really should be played on valve horns, right? Because you have so many A's, and you're starting off on a D here. It just really, it's playable on a natural horn, but it just will not have that beautiful smooth sound that I think you envision here. Like if anybody has, like, if anybody's curious about how natural horn might sound on their entry, you could, like, there are some notation applications, notation plugins that you put a plus over a stop note, right? And then you get the stopped sound, right? So you could just go through everything and then put stop notes on anything that would be stopped or stopped markings, and then just listen to it and just see, is that smooth, right? Is that, in this case, it just, there's I wouldn't consider this to be a very smooth line, right? At least with the way that everything else is playing. Yeah. All right. So moving on to, does the melody start with elegance? And here I would say, maybe you don't need to double. Does there need to be so much doubling here? Clarinets and oboes and first violins all together on that melody in the first bar. It's just a lot of weight, and it has this kind of a this kind of very reedy sound, right? And then here, when you're going on, you've got the motion here. Da da bum 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 bum, and you're adding the flutes here for, like, the resonance, right? So here's a phenomenon which I've talked about before. Garrett, you may have read the tip that I wrote about this, and about how for the classical orchestral composer, a lot of times they put in a high flute line like this, knowing that it would be absorbed into the sound of the strings, right? And the way that you have strengthened the strings here with oboe and second flute and so on, then it really is a situation where the top note or the top pitch will disappear. The top pitches here will disappear, and you can hear that in the mock-up, right? The mock-up is just obeying the rules of acoustics, right? So it's just a question, like, do you want that kind of denser sort of more it's almost a brassy kind of a sound, right? That you get from that, from that kind of that kind of combination with the first violins and oboes, and then the then the first horn, like, playing tracking from an octave below, right? So the overtones of that horn go right straight to this oboe. I'm guessing it's still first oboe, and then the violins, right? So it has a sort of a more trebly sound. Okay, so the thing that I would really caution you to think about is, like, when you have these really long stretches, just try to make it easier on the string players, right? I would just divide it like bow, like have two bows, like an up and a down per measure, right? So down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and then up, right? So, and then here, the players will just reposition their bows. And if you got something like this, you really do need a bar here, like a double bar or something, and then this needs to be the value of a quarter rest, right? Okay, and then here you could have either slurred, on an upbeat or up bow. Then you could also have down, up, down. But here, da, do you really want that all under one bow? Da, da. And then this is just so long for one bow. See, here you're just dropping the piano slurring onto the string bowing. So, Garrett, did you watch my video that this is all in this is all in the playlist, right? And in the instructions, in the announcement, right, is that I really want my participants to watch the video 12 common scoring errors, because here's one of those common scoring errors right there, right? Is just the piano slur has just been dropped right onto the string bowing, right? So, because you're just basically asking the player to bow this entire thing, right? So it would be better to have these just half bar kind of slurs, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, right? Or here you could even go down, up, down. All right. So now moving onwards, I really liked what you do here. You go string. Oops. And then wind. Then answered by cellos and bassoons. Yada-da-da-dum. String winds. Bassoon and cello. Da-da-da-da-dum. It was lovely. This is also the first time I've seen something, and I think that works really great, and this is really nice too. Here I don't think you need the beam across here. I think you can just have separate flag eighth notes here, semiquavers. All right, so you don't need the beam across here. That's just confusing, and especially in like a classical idiom, right? That kind of doesn't happen. And then here. Do you really want to not have any emphasis on the downbeat here in your winds? Do you really want da, right? Or you want ta ta, or even ta ta ta, right? And then here, do you really want this under one bow? Right? Wouldn't it be better to go, up, down, right? Now here, I think, even though this is Beethoven and so on, I think you need to say piano subito, right? So just really so that people know that it is, that you fall off a cliff here, right? And then the question is, have you really set up a subito piano correctly, right? So this is another thing. It's going to happen a lot. So this is something worth talking about. A subito piano has to be set up in a way that the mass of sound that is happening before on the forte relents. It lets go enough to where you clearly hear the downbeat, right? If that's part of it. If the downbeat is, if you have a downbeat, right? you might have a subito piano that's on the second beat or the third beat with a big rest there, right? And a general pause. So, there are a bunch of different ways to do it. You could have this a 16th triplet semiquaver with a 16th rest after it, and then, so that there's a bit of a lift. Da 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 da. Do you know what I mean? It's like you have to sort of set things up so that the transition, the reverberation of the hall, the impact of the sound, the amount of space that the listener's ear has been forced open to, doesn't suddenly, so that the drop here to the softer dynamic is really effective. It's just like, right? And I'm not really sensing that was set up quite with that kind of, you weren't really thinking about you were just changing because Beethoven changed, right? So I would say just watch out, like with this kind of heavy scoring, you have your horns and bassoons working together, and you have this, you have going to a duet on your flute right here, and you've got your strings in these lower positions, and then they're taking over in this lower place, right? That's another thing when you have so much weight above, and then the melody continues on an octave below, and all of the resonance and everything that was above is suddenly gone. The echo of this, or the reverb from this, is washing over, and then this is less clear, right? So just really watch out for those moments. And I really like the way that you don't just go, da da da, change to a different section, da da da, change to a different section, which is what I did. Here you go, like da 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 da, different section change, da 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 da, and this is nice too. The slur, da da, that's very cool. And bassoons and horns working together, it's just delightful, delicious, really. And then strings coming back here, and so on. So look, don't feel like you have to end. Do you know what I mean? Like, for my purposes, I'm perfectly happy for, when my website subscribers or maybe some Patreon supporters have they're not doing the entire movement or the entire piece, and they just sort of end on right in the middle of a bar or right at the end of a bar, and there's a phrase to come, right? You don't need to throw in a fermata or a big chord or whatever. Sometimes people feel that that's the way that they sort of settle there, and it's almost like it's almost like a little bit of a reverence, right? If you've ever played piano or danced or in a ballet class, right at the end, there's a little bit of beautiful music that the pianist plays, and then the students bow to the pianist. And having been bowed to many times by a bunch of dancers who would actually really rather just get the hell out of there, go wash all the sweat off and get into their street clothes. It's that kind of movement, that kind of moment, right, where you just want this nice long chord at the end. You don't need to do that, but I mean, if you want to do it, it's fine. I won't stop you, but you don't have to do it for my sake. All right, so this really felt period to me, right? So, I mean, it felt so much in period. That is why I sort of went back kind of thinking about, like, if that is so much in period and sounds so Beethoven, do you really want to change things around, right? Would it be better for you to play by the rules? Now, there's one last thing that I should have mentioned, and that is that I feel that a lot of the scoring here for bassoons and cellos is, the way that you have the slurs written is not really all that functional, right? I mean, I think this could, you could sort of fit it all under one bow and so on. And yeah, I mean, you could kind of slur all that together but it's, the question is that a beautiful thing, right? Is that something that it's more kind of awkward? It's more something that is a bit extended or a bit, I would just say, like, I think you want to, when you are approaching something, the Garrett, want to, you want to sort of write in things that have a kind of an idiomatic or just kind of have a natural feel when you play them. And I feel that this is less than that, right? I think you could work through something here that's a bit more playable. Even if it were just, down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow kind of thing. Or even just like getting rid of the bowing and turning it into staccato. That would actually work the best. Right? Yeah. But, yeah, other than that, like, not a huge problem. Really, it was very enjoyable to listen to, and I felt it had a wonderful sound. I think that you're using your mock-up to, very well, and that's something that, I mean, these days your client wants a good mock-up. When I first started, about, geez, oh, I'm just thinking way back, decades ago, 4 or 5 decades ago. Yeah, 4 decades ago. Mock-ups were important just in terms of like a lot of time a mock-up would be all you'd have if you were working with a dance company, and sometimes that's still true. But like usually, having built up a lot of clients in the concert music realm, the conductor would read the score, they just knew it, and I didn't really need a mock-up and so on. And so I sort of downplayed it at the beginning of this channel, right? I was really not so into mock-ups, and they've just become really, really important because you have all these people who don't know anything about music. They don't know how to read a score. They want to hear a good mock-up, and I mean, you could have a bad mock-up for a great piece, and then it just doesn't, the person who was making the decisions about the money decided they didn't like the mock-up, right? Or maybe the people, there are more people they have to convince, right? Who have even less experience with music and imagining what things could sound like. So I'm sorry to say this. A good mock-up is becoming more important. So your approach to this has been really, really nice. Okay, so there's only one more score left to this compilation video. So let's go take a look at it now. Ramses, why did you stop there? You know, what we needed from you was like to at least go to the semi-brev level over on Patreon and give me the rest of this. it's not fair. It was so perfect. The idea matched to the clarinet there. Okay, I mean, really great. But anyhow, let's focus on the stuff that you sent me. That does fall within the timeline, the limitations of the website subscribers. But yeah, just that's terrific. That fits so well. Exactly. The clarinet is the nightingale of the orchestra. It was something that Haydn and Mozart saw. Or Mozart saw from way back, and that that Beethoven and his contemporaries built on, Weber especially, and then Berlioz. Wow, his clarinet writing is just so amazing. So yeah, alrighty. So yeah, all right. So to go back here, you threw in a note that kind of doesn't work, right? This written F sharp here, right? Sounding E. It's just kind of not really part of the harmony. You can kind of hear it in the mock-up. It's sort of, we just suddenly get this conflict rather than a just really beautiful unfolding of the chorale here. Now the idea here of clarinets and bassoons in chorale is beautiful, just a great idea, Ramses, and I love the way that you just have double basses holding down this pedal down here, this pedal low F, paradosi at the end. Just it all works great. It's an enviable idea, one of these things. Like when I say enviable idea, it's almost like saying, well, boy, I wish I wrote that, or I wish I came up with that. Not to say that I have any regrets about my my contribution this time around, but yeah. Now here, I see what you're doing here. You're going like a bar of 2/4, and and here like you have kind of doubled the length of everything, but it, so this is da rather than dum, right? So half bar of 2/4, second half of the bar is the pickup bar to the to common time. All right, but I mean it doesn't really matter that much. Maybe this would work better in a with a student orchestra, or it just works better with your notation application. I don't know. Okay, so I think that you could have had a little bit of dynamic flex in here. Da da da, a little bit of crescendo, da da. Just let the warmth come into the instruments here, I would say. All right, now here you're saying solo. Now, so you say solo oboe, and then you're doubling it with first violins, and then you do it again. You say solo, and then I mean, this is a solo because there's nothing accompanying it, but like you're just having unison, right? So the thing that you get into with this kind of idea, right, of an instrument being solo and yet playing unison with with the strings, especially, what does the violin like to do? It likes to absorb the sound of anything playing along with it, right? So is this really a solo line, or is it just the first, right? So like whenever you have a single guy playing, you don't always mark them solo, right? So what will happen is the player will play out a little bit louder, a little bit with a little more projection. I mean, projection is not necessarily louder. We sort of interpret that as loud, especially if we're just thinking about the balance on a mixing board. But yeah, but they'll just play more penetratingly. Let's put it that way. And yeah, so I mean, you get that mixed sound. Yeah, and this is lovely though, the way that the flutes and the clarinets and just sort of so this is a situation of like, is there a natural transition to octaves? No, right? But it works, right? It works anyways. And I love this right in here. You got the thirds above and below in bassoons and flutes, right? That is such a Beethoven sound. And then you've got the clarinet in the middle with the first violins. It's just a lovely idea. I mean, Ramses, you have I think you really went all out on this, and it shows. So if we're going back to my evaluation criteria, which I keep forgetting to mention, does the intro set the mood effectively? Yes, it does. I mean, especially with the sounds that you end up getting, and then like this tantalizing, the potential of what this could have been, right? So, so here at the beginning, I think that you are setting the mood, especially with the choices that you make later on, right? And then, does the melody start with elegance? I mean, yeah, I would say so. I mean, maybe you don't even need the first violins here, right? If this is really a solo. And then, is there a natural flow? Yes, there is, right? See, it seems to me that you have really absorbed the lessons of Beethoven's adaptation of his Ninth Piano Sonata, right? Just like of a more organic, more something. This is probably something that he would have done himself, right? Just judging by that, by the adaptation of that sonata. Now, here's the thing: is that like, why didn't Beethoven do more of that? Is because he didn't need to, right? He probably wrote that. He probably adapted that sonata, perhaps at the suggestion of one of his students or clients or patrons, right? We don't. I don't really know why. There's probably probably somebody has done some research on it and knows the reason why. But I mean it sounds great as played by strings, but it's not really a Beethoven string quartet, right? If you listen to the depth of his scoring on his string quartet writing, it just far surpasses anything that is in his string quartet adaptation, right? So you might also look at like perhaps the most sophisticated orchestrations of this, which you just have to judge for yourself. The people who have signed up to score the entire sonata at that really high level, which I'm just allowing this 1 year. They may go way deeper than me, right? And I would still feel that like none of that would compare to a Beethoven symphony, right? Because he would just be working through it all the way at once. And I think that is the main reason why Rimsky-Korsakov says, like the lowest form of orchestration is like orchestrating a piano score, which is just a kind of a downer thing to say, right at the beginning of these evaluations. But bear with me. I think that it actually is not, right? If you look at Ravel, it is one of the highest forms of orchestration. I mean, some of his greatest works for the orchestra were originally scored on piano, and his interpretations of them are so transcendent. They're just amazing. So anyway, to not to stray too far from the topic of your interpretation here, I feel that you have really like absorbed those lessons and you're using them really, really well here. And I think that they work just as well orchestrally as they do in a string quartet. All right, and this is all really nicely done. And then here, I mean, this will be played as a triple stop, a really easy one. It's a really, really easy triple stop. Okay, but just like Garrett and a few others, and to come and before in this video, you are falling into a trap here, Ramses. Okay, how many of these orchestration challenges have you entered, right? And you have dropped the piano slurring into the string scoring, right? Is that really something you want to do? Up, down, up, down, up. Right? That's not what you want. What if it were up, down, right? Wouldn't that be much more organic? And then you can just leave these long slurs on your strings, or sorry, on your winds. That's all fine. And this is lovely. The horns supporting the the dut, 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 dut kind of and then but still having more static harmonic roll. Yeah, it's nice. And I can see by the scoring that you are sort of playing by the rules, right? Like it's all right. You don't have to put this in parentheses. It's fine. Yeah, it's all good. This isn't so exposed, right? Getting this A right in here, it'll absorb into the sound of everything else. You're good. You don't need to put any parentheses on anything in a natural horn part. Yeah. Okay. All right, and here you're saying leggermente. Do you really want that tam? What if you want tam? Right? Tam. I just think you get more, you get more oomph at the beginning of the bar, right? And then especially if you're going to have the unison with the first violins and then octave doubling with the first flute. Yeah, I mean it's a cool idea. Maybe you don't even need the violins here at all, right? This is kind of nice though. I like this. This kind of drag into the third beat by the lower strings. That's such a cool idea. And then I feel like you're letting the gas out of it here with this diminuendo. It's just the way that you've scored this. It's so joyous that you're opening the color up here. You don't need a diminuendo, right? Okay, make it mezzo staccato all the way across. Put a staccato marking here and there and there. All of they make them all work together. Right? Rather than it just feels fussy, right? When you have a slur and one of them is like just a standard slurred note, and then the other ones have the articulation. Make the articulation uniform, right? And then and just as I said before, I feel that you are headed to a mezzo forte here. You should just let it be mezzo forte. Everybody just go to mezzo forte, and then soft, bum. Bum, mezzo forte, da da dum, soft, da da dum, right? Then I think you get more of an emotional contour here, and then just once again slurring, right? I mean, shouldn't this be divided a little bit more evenly? Up down, right? Doesn't that work a little bit better rather than up bow, a little teeny bit of down bow, and then all of this is all up bow, right? It's just kind of unevenly balanced. But yeah, I mean, just such a fun score, Ramses. It's just really, just so nice to get this from you. Yeah, don't worry about the occasional A, the occasional F. See, it's like here, like you're worried about this A here, but look, this F here is like going to be more cranky. I mean, especially if you're going to give it an accented staccato, right? You probably don't, if it's piano, if this is meant to be piano, you don't even need the accents, right? You just need the staccato, right? Yeah. And then the same thing here. Don't bother with the accents, just mark it staccato. Yeah. And then here I would say, if you're going to follow my direction and go mezzo forte to piano, then maintain this same articulation style. Because the listener will be expecting it. Doink, doink, Isn't it kind of weird to go and then just go da, right? It's just a little strange. But it can make sense too. But the thing is, you don't really have enough thematic material to show how this articulation style makes sense leading into the lack of one, right? But all that other stuff aside, I like the pizzicato under here, and the pizzicato is all the more reason for you to go to, is to continue with that slurred staccato, mezzo staccato. Make them all staccatos, not just, don't leave the downbeat without one to repeat that. Okay, so there's just one last little thing that I think we need to talk about in here. It's whether you really do want this. Do you want the, kind of thing happening at the same time as da 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 da? So do you want this da 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 kind of thing? Do you want that? Do you want that syncopation, right? That's something that Beethoven kind of didn't do in his orchestral scoring so much. Maybe these could be triplets, right? This could be a triplet eighth. Right, so it would be as at the same time as bum bum, right? I'm speeding up on you here, but I'm just trying to get through it. But yeah, so just think about that possible. You just put a 3 or a just triplets. You could also think of that as 6. Anyhow. So yeah, so good work, Ramses. Really nice entry this year. All right, so keep it up, okay? And wow, I like the next year's piece is going to be absolutely completely different period, different composer at a different stage of their life, writing in a style that you would never possibly imagine that they would write. And with that, tantalizing preview. I will just thank all of our contributors to this compilation of videos, and you guys all did really great. I know that I have given people some pretty intense feedback, even just in this, but that it is all intended to just move you forward. And let's face it. I mean, if you knew what you were doing, you wouldn't need to send your score to me, right? So it's my job to just point out things that ways that you could possibly work things around. Sometimes I'll get an entry where there's kind of nothing wrong, but it's worth sort of talking about what went right and what are the alternatives, right? So, be that as it may, I thought this was a really strong start, really powerful start to this this particular round of evaluations, the 2023 Orchestration Challenge covering Beethoven's 24th Sonata. And this is a really excellent start. Thanks, everybody. And stay tuned because the next compilation is coming very, very soon.